As the number of COVID-19 cases skyrocket in Latin America region, Chile becomes a new hotspot for the epidemic. The Chinese government has reached a positive consensus with India over their tense border standoff in the Himalayas. Dozens of Lebanese protesters took the streets in Beirut on Wednesday to demand freedom of speech on social media. Hello from the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the south. I'm Ernesto Dominguez. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has once again rejected the interventionist activities of the Lima Group, which he describes as a cartel backed by the United States to attack the country. Arreaza tweeted that these governments are seeking to divert attention from their catastrophic handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. He added that they are ignorant of the Bolivarian Republic's constitution. The comments follow the Lima Group's criticisms of the swearing-in in Venezuela's new National Electoral Council. Bolivia's de facto president Janine Áñez has revealed her intentions to delay the country's elections in an effort to remain in power. On Tuesday, Áñez raised the possibility of postponing the vote by about 2 months, arguing that there was a risk of infection from the novel coronavirus. Meanwhile, the coup government is ramping up its campaign against the Movement Towards Socialism Party, which surveys shows is the favorite to win the September 6th polls. Chile has become a major hotspot for the pandemic as the novel coronavirus hits hard in Latin America. COVID-19 has caused more than 82,000 deaths and more than 1.7 million people have been infected. Chile became one of the world's hotspots for the pandemic on Tuesday with over 200,000 COVID-19 cases. The country ranks first in Latin America in relative terms with more than 9,600 infected for every million inhabitants. Chile lost its ability to control the virus at the end of April. COVID-19 cases began to increase when the government proposed the so-called new normality, with the contagion passing from the wealthy neighborhoods to the poorest and most populated areas of the capital, Santiago. It's at those areas that people claim that they'll be unable to eat if they cannot go to work. Peru's health minister is claiming that fatalities due to the novel coronavirus are declining, although the country has surpassed 7,000 deaths. To date, Peru has over 200,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 after 3 months of a nationwide mandatory lockdown.
Es que la mortalidad en el Perú está bajando.
The death rate in Peru is dropping. It's falling, slowly but surely. In terms of infection, our epidemic is slowing down. The number of cases used to double every 7 days. Today, it is every 15 days, and in some regions, every 20 days, which means the speed of infection has slowed down. In most of the country's regions and in many provinces, and in some places, even in the country, a significant number of districts don't have any cases.
The president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernández, has tested positive for COVID-19 amid reports that the country's healthcare system has collapsed under the strain of dealing with the virus. Hernández was admitted to Tegucigalpa's military hospital, where he is receiving medical treatment. He says, however, that he will continue performing his duties virtually. As of Tuesday night, the COVID-19 pandemic had killed 330 people locally, with 9,656.
Quiero comunicar que durante este fin de semana
I want to communicate that during this weekend
in Colombia, a group of pilots have delivered medical supplies to the country's most remote regions to combat COVID-19. 50 volunteers from the Aero Club, the Colombia Aviation Training Institute, carry out daily humanitarian flights transporting government-provided medical supplies and healthcare personnel occasionally. They leave from an airport in Bogota to far-flung places stretching from the department of Chocó to the Amazonian regions of Putumayo and Amazonas.
These are planes that can land on short runways, in remote places, even on farm tracks, and can pick up the COVID-19 test samples very quickly and bring them immediately to Bogota. We all do it out of passion, both private and commercial pilots, and here we are united by another passion, which is to help. There is no greater reward than doing what you are passionate about, and even more so if you help others.
The Dominican Republic, Haiti, the French Guiana, and Suriname have been identified as areas of concern in the Caribbean region as they continue to experience rising COVID-19 cases. The Pan American Health Organization Director, Dr. Carissa Etienne, said that while most islands of the Caribbean have not reported significant increases, the organization sees reasons for concern for Haiti and the Dominican Republic in particular.
Where most islands have not reported significant increases in COVID-19, we remain concerned about Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Both countries, which share an active border, continue to report a rise in new cases, particularly Haiti. We are witnessing a spike in transmission in the north of Costa Rica, around the border with Nicaragua. French Guiana went from 140 to 1,326 cases only in 1 month, a period that coincides with an increased transmission across its border with the state of Amapá in Brazil, and also with an increase of cases in neighboring countries as Suriname. In addition, there is ongoing transmission in the northern states of Brazil that borders with Guyana and Suriname. Also in the Amazonian region where Venezuela, Brazil, and Colombia intersect, and in the borders between Peru, Brazil, and Colombia. But why do borders matter? Well, you see, before COVID-19, these areas were home to vulnerable populations, which often includes indigenous groups, remote communities, and migrants, people who travel frequently for work, family, and in search of new opportunities.
Jamaica recorded no new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday. The total number of confirmed cases in the island remains at 621. At the same time, 19 more patients have recovered and have been released from care, bringing the total number to more than 400. The island's recovery rate is now 72.3%. 2 critically ill patients are among the 162 active cases under observation. The island's parish health departments are currently following close to 700 close contacts of confirmed cases, while 181 patients remain in isolation. Welcome back to From the South. China has called for a peace agreement with India to resolve the border conflict over the strategically important Galwan Valley in the Himalayas. Foreign Ministry spokesman Xiao Lijian said both nations should work together because their common interests far outweigh their differences. Despite this declaration, local media from both countries have reported the presence of military troops along the Chinese-Indian border. On Monday night, 50 or 20 Indian troops were killed following a clash with Chinese forces. In China's Beijing's airports have cancelled more than 1,200 flights as authorities rush to contain a new coronavirus outbreak linked to a wholesale food market. This after 31 more cases were reported in the capital. State media has reported that restrictions placed on close to 30 residential compounds will be maintained. Meanwhile, schools have been shut and residents urged to shelter in place as thousands await their test results for the novel coronavirus. Germany has placed more than 300 Berlin households under quarantine after 57 people tested positive for COVID-19. The inhabitants of these households in 7 different apartment buildings are not allowed to leave their homes for 14 days. The lockdown follows the launch of Germany's coronavirus tracking application. Experts say finding new cases quickly is key to clamping down on fresh clusters, especially at a time when European countries are lifting lockdown restrictions and opening their borders. Italy has reopened high schools across the country for 35,000 seniors to take final oral exams in person rather than virtually. The Academic Commission will have 5 oral exams a day at 1 hour each, with a 15 minutes break between 2 to sanitize the area. Classes will not officially resume until September. The government had implemented a national lockdown on March 5 after the novel coronavirus began to spread rapidly through the country and all the areas. Tourists from the Balkan region have returned to neighboring Albania, helping to soften the blow of the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. The country's borders and beaches have recently reopened as the tourism industry faces a deeply uncertain future. Locals feel this is an opportunity to help each other despite a difficult financial situation caused by the crisis. So far, Albania has held off an explosive COVID-19 outbreak with 37 non-deaths from the virus and around 1,600 infections.
Given the difficult situation, we are looking to the Balkans, the Balkan market. Many of the current holiday makers are from Kosovo, Montenegro, and obviously Albania. The pandemic has caused great economic difficulties, an economic crisis, and in these conditions, why shouldn't our countries in the Balkans help each other during this holiday period?
France has denied ignoring violent clashes between rival groups that left several injured and cars burned in Dijon on Tuesday. Government spokesperson Sibeth Ndiaye says it's wrong to say the administration didn't pay any attention to the situation. She adds that authorities intervened with the necessary force, sending police reinforcements and a top official to quell the 4 nights of unrest.
Alors, je crois qu'il est erroné de dire que nous
I think it's wrong to say that we didn't pay any attention to the situation in Dijon's Grecil neighborhood. We intervened with proportion to the situation given the situation on the ground. As you know, Deputy Interior Minister Laurent Nunez has, of course, condemned the violence that took place in Dijon. He condemned, of course, the fact that some people wanted to carry out justice themselves.
The United Nations is electing 5 new non-permanent members of the Security Council for the 2021-2022 term. This is taking place under special voting arrangements at the UN headquarters due to the COVID-19 related restrictions. 7 countries are vying for the spots, including Mexico, India, Kenya, Djibouti, Canada, Ireland, and Norway. The 193-member group is also holding elections for presidents of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly and members of the Economic and Social Council. An ongoing campaign against Canada obtaining a seat on the Security Council has received traction in recent weeks. Venezuelan-Canadian Nino Paglia was among those who rejected the country's election because of its appalling foreign policy.
As a Venezuelan Canadian, I know for a fact that the Canadian government is not doing that. On the contrary, it seeks regime change in Venezuela by encouraging rebellion instead of cooperation, in blatant interference in the internal affairs of Venezuela. Canada is also imposing unilateral sanctions against Venezuela, which also breaks the United Nations Charter. Canada has a poor foreign policy record, as mentioned in the petition. The UN Security Council deserves members that bring true respect for the institution and a proven sincerity to maintain the high standard of the UN Charter. I ask to vote no for Canada's bid for a seat on the United Nations Security Council.
Meanwhile, Philonis Floyd has called on the United Nations to set up an independent commission to investigate the murder of African Americans by law enforcement. His brother, 46 years old, George Floyd, was killed by police in the U.S. city of Minneapolis on May 25th, sparkling global protests.
I hope that you would consider establishing an independent commission of inquiry to investigate police killings of black people in America and the violence used against peaceful protesters.
And we're taking one last very short break now, so stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. Dozens of Lebanese protesters have rallied in Beirut to demand freedom of speech on social media. Armed with flags, demonstrators gather outside the Palace of Justice in the capital, chanting revolution. The protest comes after investigations were launched into social media posts deemed insulting to President Michel Aoun. The country's economic and financial situation has exposed deep mistrust in the government's crisis management, which predates the coronavirus pandemic.
So we're basically here for freedom of speech, if you want, like in a big title. Basically, all protesters who have been commenting and criticizing the job of the government and especially the job of the Lebanese presidency have been called into detention for silly talks on whether on Twitter or Facebook or any social media page. So we decided today as revolutionaries to come here and give ourselves to the Qada.
North Korea announced on Wednesday that it would soon redeploy soldiers to the previously demilitarized Kaesong industrial zone and the Mount Kungan areas. According to a military spokesman, civil police posts will be set up again to strengthen the guard over the front line. These posts have been withdrawn from the demilitarized zone under the Inter-Korea Agreement in the military field signed in 2018. Under the detailed military action plans to be approved by Central Military Commission of the Workers' Party of Korea, units will be deployed at the two stations located in areas bordering South Korea. A court in Indonesia has sentenced 7 Papuan pro-independence activists to almost a year in jail in treason charges. The activists were jailed for organizing anti-racism protests last year, despite calls from rights groups and politicians to drop their charges and release them. However, the court ordered the period of detention that the men had already served to be deducted from their sentences, meaning they will walk free within several weeks. Dozens of rights activists staged a rally in front of court on Wednesday, demanding that the 7 men be released.
I received the verdict because it was only 11 months from 11 years of prosecutors' demands, but even so we are still waiting for the defendant, Mukhtar Tabuni, whether to accept or take other steps.
Tanzania's parliament has been dissolved ahead of elections due in October, with President John Magufuli pledging a free and fair vote. The Tanzanian constitution requires that the 393-seat parliament be dissolved ahead of the elections. The vote is scheduled for October, but the precise date has not yet been set. The dissolution comes just days after Tanzanian opposition leaders Freeman Mbowe, who had announced his intention to run against Magufuli, was allegedly beaten and hospitalized in what his Chadema party said was a politically motivated attack. In November 2019, the governing Chama Pinduzi party won more than 99% of seats in local elections boycotted by the opposition over allegations of government interference. Candidates seeking electoral positions in Uganda's general elections due to early next year will have to conduct their campaigns without physical contact, as dictated by COVID-19 social and physical distancing. According to an announcement of the Electoral Commission, a new roadmap of electoral activities has been set up to November the 2nd and the 3rd, 2020, as nominations dates for presidential candidates. Meanwhile, those seeking seats in parliament will be nominated a month earlier on October 12 and 13 this year. The chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Justice Simon Biabakama, expressed at a press conference on Tuesday that no definite dates have been set for the elections. Biabakama, however, indicated a general period of between January 10 and February 8, 2021. Parties to the South Sudan peace deal on Wednesday agreed on the allocations of the country's 10 states and will not be expected to name governors. President Salva Kiir's side will nominate governors for 6 states, while Riek Machar's Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition will nominate 3 states, and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance will nominate the governors for only 1 state. Disagreements between President Kiir's group and opposition parties over the states has been a major obstacle to completing the formation of the unity government. The rival parties in South Sudan has been locked in a 3-month-long impasse over the sharing of state leadership positions.
Which was agreed upon in the September 2018 peace deal, but pushed back as crucial issues had yet to be dealt with.
Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has said leading opposition leader Soumaïla Cissé, who was kidnapped days before the country's parliamentary election in March, is alive. Last month, Cissé's family warned the government was moving too slow in securing the release of Cissé, a runner-up in 2018 presidential election and president of the Union for the Republic and Democracy Party. Unidentified gunmen seized Cissé on March 25th while he was campaigning in the Timbuktu region ahead of the May 29 vote. Despite a years-long conflict raging in Mali, Cissé's abduction was the first of a politician of his rank. Mali has been struggling to contain an armed campaign that began as a localized revolt in the country's north in 2012, before spreading to the center of the countries and then to the neighboring Niger and Burkina Faso.
Studied in the French city of Montpellier and trained as a software engineer. He entered politics in 1992.
Malawi's main opposition leader, Lazarus Chakwera, is confident about the chances of victory in the upcoming presidential elections. The country's constitutional court ordered a rerun of last year's polls following mass protests over irregularities in the initial vote.
And this time around, we have more confidence that this election will be treated with the integrity it deserves because it expresses the will of Malawians. Malawians must be respected. Their rights must be respected. It is not a matter of who counts the vote. It should be a matter of every vote counts.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. As I always say, you can find these and many other stories on the website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Ernesto Dominguez. Thank you for watching.